Matt Johnson. Super excited to have him on the program. Matt is a rock star in his own right. He's an agency owner. He is a podcaster. I was on his program, Real Estate Uncensored. I don't know, it was a few months back. So it was a great time. But he also has his own podcast, and he's got a new book out. So love to just get into it with Matt. So Matt, you're coming down from San Diego right now, right?
I am, and it's we're hanging in there. We're trying to stay out of the California craziness.
Yeah, for sure. So tell me, give the audience a little background, a little brief bio on you and your background.
Okay, so most people in the real estate profession would know me from Real Estate Uncensored, which I started 5 years ago with my co-host Greg McDaniel. Now, what most people don't know is that how I got that was I had run a real estate team in the past, like shortly before the crash. I loved certain parts of it, like marketing and team building, and hated everything else. So I ditched that. I basically went out and I started practicing the drums again after I got out of real estate. Ended up in like 4 different bands, right?
Wow.
And in an effort to figure out, well, how do you market, like how do you be a musician in this new weird age, I taught myself how to build websites and, the basics of social media and stuff like that. So that landed me, all those things kind of came together, and I got a position at an agency called Viral Marketing, which does video and email marketing for a lot of the top agents around the country. So I got to work with people like Jeff Quinton and Greg Harrelson and all these super awesome people. Well, then when I got promoted within the agency, the idea was that we're going to do Google Hangouts with all these influential people in real estate, right?
Yeah.
And so I started doing them. I got to do Google Hangouts with Joshua Smith from GSD Mode, Michael Mayer, Matthew Ferry, who was ridiculously awesome, Greg Harrelson, and a bunch of other guys like that, Lars Hedenberg. So anyway, point being, one of the, I did one with Greg McDaniel, and we did a couple of them together, and he called me up and said one day and just said, dude, we got to start a podcast together. What do you say? I said, well, I was going to call you next week and pitch you the same thing. So yes, it just came together at the right time. The idea was that he wanted to get into more coaching more people, and I was thinking about, I was looking at the industry going, I can create training products and things that I think can help agents to be more successful. That was really the extent of the idea that we had. And so as the podcast started to take off, I kind of went on that journey of becoming MicroFamous myself, just being what I would define as famously influential to the right people, right? So a narrowly focused group of people. And the podcast went from starting the podcast and me being just a nobody that worked in an agency to me and Greg speaking to a packed out standing room only breakout session at an event 18 months later.
Wow.
So it happened that fast. And it was because of a lot of things, but it really, that was the first thing that got me started down the path of figuring out, how does this online influence thing work? Mm-hmm. How do you build influence that's actually real and enduring?
Yeah.
How do you become famously influential? So it's not just about being well known, it's about being able to get people up off the couch and moving. It's the influential part. So anyway, just that was kind of my experience. Flash forward to today, essentially I dropped everything else I was in. I made the same mistake I did in music, by the way, and got into 4 different businesses. That's a whole other story, but I got out of all that stuff and I went down the track of helping thought leaders like coaches and consultants launch podcasts that would grow their business and attract the right clients. And because we sell one thing to one type of person, I'm able to run the agency in about 4 to 5 hours a week and spend the rest of my time doing stuff that I enjoy, whether it's writing the book or hosting podcasts or whatever, or just, I've got time again to play music again.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, and side note, my assistant actually went through your course, mm-hmm. and we launched a podcast based on your course. So we've been directly influenced by Matt because I was on his program. We got to talking about this. So this is really interesting to me because I read an article years ago that really impacted me, which was a Wired article by the editor of Wired magazine. And he was talking about this idea of 1,000 true fans. Yeah. And if a musician, which you can relate to, if a musician can have 1,000 true fans, like people that just worship the ground they walk on, they'll go to every concert, they'll buy all the merch, they'll be at every show. You can make a good living as a musician with 1,000 true fans. You don't have to be, Taylor Swift or something. You can actually do really well.
Yep.
And the same is true just about with every industry, though, when you really look at it. If you can just get true fans, right?
Yeah, it totally is, and that was deeply influential, right? Because I read that when I was a musician, and then I came across people like Derek Sivers, who is big in the business world now, but then he was the head of CD Baby. Mm-hmm. And he was telling musicians the same thing. It's look, you don't need to stop trying to get signed. Stop trying to go the traditional route. Just go develop your fan base. Now you can sell your albums directly to them. And the same is true, and I think it was, I want to give him credit, but it was one of our past podcast guests basically said, look, if you are Tom Cruise famous to a database of 1,000 to 1,500 people, you can run a 7-figure real estate business all day long, every year.
Yeah.
And I think the same is mostly true when it comes to the next level up from that, which is coaching consulting. I think you only need an audience of about 5,000 to 10,000 people to run a 7-figure coaching business. And I know that's true because I know 3 of them that do it, which is like Lars Hedenberg and Michael Hellickson Club Wealth and a bunch of other of my friends all operate in that same space where the entire market of the real estate agents who can afford to pay $1,500 to $2,000 a month for group coaching is under 15,000 people.
Yeah.
And that may be on a good year. On a bad year, it's probably under 10,000. But anyway, so you've got there's multiple coaching businesses that all operate in that same small space. And so it really drove the point home because I saw it with my own eyes that the more narrowly focused you are, it has all kinds of benefits. But one of the best ones is that you just don't need to be everywhere and you don't need to be everything to everyone. So the challenge is just then becomes, well, if I don't need to be everything to everyone, then who am I? Like who am I going to go after? Who are the right people for me? And it's like, well, that's the $1 million question. That's what you got to figure out.
So let's relate this to like my audience for this podcast is typically real estate brokers and agents and some team leaders and brokerage owners.
Yep.
How do they start this kind of journey that you take people on of like what would be like step 1, step 2, kind of walking people starting the process out?
Well, it's definitely starting with the right people, and I'll give you a couple of things and an example that was really good. So first things first is a couple of years ago, I asked myself the question, who do I want to spend all my time with? So if one of my clients dropped into San Diego and just texted me out of the blue and said, hey, Matt, you want to come grab a drink or I'll buy you a coffee, which people know that I'm a big Starbucks fan. So I asked myself, who would I actually want to get that text from? And I'm like, well, I can reel off the names. I know exactly who I'd want to hear from, and I can name other people that I wouldn't.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the things. That was a big step for me, was just asking myself that question. Now, the way that this applies in the real estate space is I was talking to the CEO of Exit Realty, who was on our show a couple weeks ago, and she said something that I really haven't heard anybody else in real estate say. I think it's my opinion, but I hadn't heard anybody else really say it, which is that real estate is moving towards specialization at like the agent level and at the broker level. And I think that's true. So I think for the agents in the audience, or if you're an indie broker with a small team, like you have an incredible opportunity to dial in and really decide who your right people are. Yeah. And to the point where, look, your right people might be people who are moving from this area of Nashville to the west end of Nashville or something like that where the new development is, right? Don't worry about serving everybody. Figure out who the best bread and butter people are that you really love to work with, that the problem that they have is a problem that you're excited to solve and you know how to solve it, and just start tailoring everything to go after them specifically rather than trying to appeal to everyone and then you end up appealing to no one. And the fact that she confirmed that's what they're pushing their agents to do and that's where she sees the trends going too is really encouraging, because I've been telling agents to do that for years and mostly it falls on deaf ears.
Yeah. What's interesting about that, what you're saying is I was just watching a Joe Rogan podcast, and they were talking about a similar aspect of television, about how television, when I was a kid in the 70s, there was 3 channels, right? There's nothing else. Well, you had 3 channels to choose from. Now we have hundreds of channels, but also Hulu and Netflix and, Amazon Prime and now Disney Plus. And it's extremely niche. And so what's happened is you've gone from a standard of broadcasting wanting to get 20 or 30 million people watching to you have a hit if you got 4 or 5 million people watching, because they can make a ton of money with 3 or 4 or 5 million people watching. That's a hit show now, whereas before that would have been canceled instantaneously.
That's right. Look, if you can't beat Dukes of Hazzard on Thursday night, you're out.
Done, right? So, but isn't that true with real estate agents, really, when you think about it? We've got a plethora of agents, thousands of agents, but it's the agents that are winning in the niche that are going to kill it, right? So it's really interesting when you do that.
Yeah, exactly. It's the people that, there's a lot of ways to slice it, but if you start with who the right people are first, it's hard to express to people that have never done it and seen all the downstream effects. Yeah. But I'll just give people a quick peek. So someone like Jeff Cohn, for example, right? They know who their bread and butter person is. They know it is move-up buyers who have a house to sell in Omaha. They both probably 2-income families with a couple of younger kids, and everything is secure, good credit rating, good jobs, no problems. They've owned one house, so they at least know what the buying process is like, and they're not going to freak out and be first-time home buyers, right? Well, they know that. Well, guess what? That means they can tailor all their marketing, all their online lead gen, their client experience, like all that stuff. And you'd think that would be, well, that's restrictive. Mm-hmm. Except he's built the number one team in the entire state and just moved the number one team from Berkshire Hathaway over to KW based on that model of knowing exactly what cream of the crop, bread and butter client that they want to appeal to. And the downstream effects of that are less complexity in your business. You're not trying to serve different types of people with different types of problems, which means you can streamline all of your systems. Mm-hmm. You can hire people a lot easier. Yeah. You can extract yourself from production a lot easier, right? So Jeff Cohn runs that team in a couple hours of management time a week, right? Lars Hedenberg out in the Carolinas does the same thing with his 7-figure business, right? There's a bunch of people that do it. But all that comes from the choice of deciding who the right people are, focusing on them, and then all those other downstream effects can start to take place in your business. Without that decision to focus on being famously influential to the right people, you'll end up working with buyers and sellers and investors and doing a little bit of commercial and doing this and that, and then you'll realize you have no systems. You can't extricate yourself from anything. You can't even hardly hire someone from my outdesk because you literally have nothing for them to plug into. It's like, well, shadow me for a week and then I'll tell you to do stuff. I'm like, great, okay. That doesn't work, right? So it's all but without seeing it up close, without like getting around people like Jeff Cohn and Lars and Greg Harrelson, all these people that have done it, it's hard for people to see the vision of what happens when they tell this person no, so that they can tell other people that they don't know yet yes, because those people don't exist yet.
Let me ask you this question. So this is interesting. Do you pick the niche based on your passion, or do you pick the niche based on the market, or do you do both?
Well, both. I will tell you, though, if you pick it based on your passion and there's no money in it, you'll lose the passion.
Real fast.
You better be really passionate. I would say pick what you want is you want the Venn diagram, obviously. You want the intersection of the stuff you're passionate about and the stuff that the market wants. I will say this, though, and I go into this in the book, which is if you're going to go after a certain segment, because somebody asked me this earlier, like, what if you niche too far down? Yeah. And I was thinking about it because I could think that's a legitimate fear, but I think it's really hard to actually do in practice. Mm-hmm. And here's the best way to avoid it. If you're going to niche down to the affluent.
Ah, interesting.
Simple, right?
You niche down, but you go up in income.
Niche down, smaller audience, but go up in income, right? And that's really easy to do in real estate. And a lot of other markets, it's like, well, how do I do that? Well, Tesla figured it out in cars. Mm-hmm. Apple figured it out in phones and iPods and stuff like that. Like, it's the same strategy, but essentially you're looking for three things. You're looking for, like, in terms of like finding the most valuable slice of any market. You want the people that are the early adopters. Those are the ones where the sales of something new come easier. You want the affluent, which we talked about, and then you want the influential. Yeah. So one of the best things that I accidentally did by the way that I got into the market is because I started working with the super influential first. They were the ones that came to me for podcasting. Then when they signed on and they got results, the next round of prospects would go to my website and they'd look at the client list and they'd go, holy cow, I know them and I know them and I know them. And like, it was just instant credibility. And when those people talked about me publicly and said, oh, you got to work with Matt, other people actually listened. It didn't roll off like water off a duck's back because they themselves had influence. So if you get that, early adopter, influential, all that stuff. Yeah.
So I love this idea because it's in a recruiting sense. When I'm recruiting brokerages, or I'm helping people recruit on a brokerage level, I have to talk about what I call the bell cow theory. The bell cow theory is if I can bring one top producing agent from another company to my company, everybody will follow along because they're the bell cow. They hear that bell, they're like, why'd that cow go that way? Or why'd that person go that way? Maybe they should pay attention to them. So, but you did the same thing with podcasting and bringing in these highly influential people. But the question I think a lot of audience people will have, listeners will have, or viewers will have is, how'd you land those people? I mean, how'd that happen?
Well, it was podcasting, right? The nuts and bolts is that I put myself in a position to get into smart conversations with those people, and smart people respect people that ask good questions. Yeah. So the practical part of it was I just needed a foothold, and podcasting gave me that foothold, and anybody can do the same thing, right? So if you're a local agent, you don't necessarily need to start a podcast, but start a Facebook Live series where you feature people, have them on Zoom, stream it to your Facebook Live page. Great. You can just about reach out to nearly anyone you want. You know, my co-host Greg has had the mayor of his city on a random Facebook Live, and Greg has like 15,000 people that follow him on Facebook. He's not Gary Vee,
right.
You know, and I don't even know that they asked.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
People, it's still such a novel thing that that building relationships with influential people at a local level is not that hard. Right. If you go in with something like that, like a Facebook Live, like, hey, I would like to feature you and would love to talk about this thing that you're excited about. You know, this nonprofit that you sit on the board of. That's a great one, by the way.
Yeah.
Right? So think about all the people they're involved in causes, charitable organizations, and things like that. It may not be their main gig, but they're passionate about it. Go interview them about it and stream it live to your Facebook Live, Facebook profile. What that does is that gives you the ability to have a smart conversation where you can ask an intelligent person good questions, and people respect when people ask them good questions. And guess what? They're going to ask you, now, what is it that you do again? Mm-hmm. And that's where you better know who your right people are. Because if you know who your right people are, then you can say, oh, I help move up buyers, typically people that are moving from like mid and central Omaha. I help them get into their next dream home in West Omaha where they can raise their kids and put them through high school. Like that is you know what I'm saying? Like when you have that dialed in, they don't just go, oh, you're an agent. They go, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I know a couple people that are in that same situation. They're looking to get into the West Omaha neighborhoods, and they have kids, and they like the school districts out there. Like it gets them immediately thinking about who their people are. So when you have something like that to say and somebody asks you what you do, it doesn't fall on the, oh, that's nice.
Yeah. Specificity unlocks that, reticular activator. So people start pattern recognizing for what you just said. And if you choose general, there's no pattern to recognize, right? So
exactly. Or you just fall into the pattern of, oh, you're the 17th agent I know, so you're at the bottom of that bucket, which is never a good place to be. Yes.
So when you and I love this because what you're doing really and we're all guilty of this, we love our ego stroked, right? So when we're talking we just do.
I don't know what you speak of, but yeah.
So when we are talking to these folks in the community and we're saying, hey, would you come on to this Facebook Live or my podcast, it's pretty hard for them to say no. And I've had this happen to me too. I mean, people say, come on the radio show, come on the TV show. And you're like, oh yeah, of course. I want to be famous. I like to have everybody see that I'm super cool. Yep. And so it's a hard thing to say no to, but what a great way to make a connection rather than making, kind of an awkward conversation and trying to make a connection some other way.
Yeah. Or try to meet them at networking events, which doesn't exist anymore right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that I think real estate agents would see, and brokers too, would probably catch the vision more if they understood the value of the right network of about 25 to 50 people. And there's some people that are really good at this, like Chris Waters down in Texas is really good at having a network of strategic partners, and a lot of them actually put money in to co-market together. They're offsetting his lead gen costs, his radio and billboard stuff like that. Anyway, point being, it's like, well, yeah, I can invite somebody on my Facebook Live once a week for a year and have 50 people, but which 50 people do I reach out to? Like, right. Well, that's when you go back to who are your right people, and then you ask yourself, who holds the relationship with more of those people? Well, it's accountants, it's CPAs, bookkeepers for businesses, it's investors, it's financial advisors, it's insurance agents. Right? Now, granted, some of them may be the most boring people in the world, but that's not really what matters, right? You're streaming live to Facebook. Who cares? Right. You're the agent. You be the entertaining one. Like that's your job. Yeah. But what you're really looking for is you just want who are the right 50 people that if I just built a relationship with them, they could send me referrals for the next 10 years, and just narrow that down to who are the right 50 people. And if you get those people, I think people would catch that vision of understanding that, hey, each of those 50 people can send me 2 deals a year if I just build a good relationship with them. And that's the best database to have. Like in my agency, like the most powerful database that I have isn't my email list necessarily. It's the relationships I have with 50 of the top influencers in the coaching consulting space that I can call them up and go, hey man, I just released a book. Would you like to review it? And the answer is an automatic yes. Yeah. Which is why I got like 25 great reviews for the book right out of the gate that went on my landing page for my book. It was because I spent years cultivating those relationships and just giving. And a lot of times agents they don't exactly know who to go to, who to go after.
Right.
And they don't really know how to start that relationship. They want to get into a relationship with people. They understand the value of that, but they don't really know how to start. We talked about that with the Facebook Live stuff. So if you take those two things and you understand who are the right people, and now you know how to reach out to them, the rest of it's just tactical stuff you can learn on YouTube.
What's interesting about that is we talk about something in my coaching called the power centers of every community. Every community, large and small, has centers of power, and it's small groups of men and women that control, the path and the progress of every city. I mean, it really is. I mean, if you make a list of those people, it's a pretty short list, like you're saying. I mean,
it's scary short.
It's scary short, right? 20, 30, 40 people. So then the question mark is, do you know who those people are in your community? Could you create that list if you took some time? And if you made a list, how could you get connected to them? And now you're giving people a really tactical, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's a tactical and it's an easier way than probably other ways that people try all the time.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Chamber of Commerce meetings, BNI. Yeah. It's like that. That's not going to take you to the power centers. The power centers are hanging out with each other in private events. They're not hanging out at the Chamber of Commerce.
No, that's the people that want to become power centers.
Yes,
right?
And they don't know how.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you as when you're starting this, you're doing the genesis of this. You're starting out. You create your what people might call your avatar, which is what you're talking about when you're talking about your ideal client model, and you're kind of building who you're trying to attract. You're looking at your power centers. You're looking at Facebook Live or podcasting as a way to create that connection. Where do you go from there? Are you trying to how do you leverage that the next level? Is there that next step, or is it just more of the same?
Yeah, there's definitely a next step, but I would say in the beginning you focus on who the power centers are and go after the influencers first, and you worry less about whatever audience you might be building.
Got it.
So in those first, like let's say you decide, hey, I'm going to do a Facebook Live series, I'm going to do one a week for a year. Great, that's going to give you 50 relationships. I wouldn't worry about the audience at all.
Wow, that's interesting.
Because you'll get so much value from those 50 people.
This is what's interesting. I think everybody's audience obsessed right now, and it's all about
think
followers.
That's very true.
It's all about followers. It's all about likes. It's all about engagement. And what you're saying is that's really not true. I mean, really, it's about the relationship you're creating with the person you're interviewing. That's really
just to start out with. Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
because I don't think you can do a lot of both. Like I said, I mean, financial advisors and insurance agents are not going to set the interwebs on fire with their sparkling personality. That's just the reality.
Right, it's not going to happen.
But if you beat yourself up for it, you'll go, oh man, like I feel like that last interview wasn't really good. I didn't get very good engagement. Well, yeah, no joke.
Yeah.
But that's not the issue. The issue is, did you leave that person with a great impression, and are you going to follow up with them and take them out to lunch in a month and push that relationship to the next level? Now, if you're not going to do that, then the whole thing is pointless. But if you are going to do that, if you're going to accelerate that relationship, which is one of the things I talk about in the book, you can do simple things like, so Michael Mayer back in the day had no CRM, right? When he was in Kansas City, he just had a Google Calendar. So he would every day his calendar would come up, and there was things that he had put on the calendar 3 and 6 months ago, and it was just these reminders to, hey, reach out to these 10 people, and he'd have 10 people from his list, and they would just store it on Google Calendar. But he actually did it. So when he took somebody new kind of into his world, then he would set a series of reminders on his Google Calendar of, okay, this week connect with them on LinkedIn. Next week, friend them on Facebook. The week after that, endorse their top couple of skills on LinkedIn. The next week after that, give them a recommendation, whatever. So there's different things that we can do, and all that stuff is in the book, by the way, to accelerate that relationship in a very soft, non-weird, non-pushy way, right? A way that actually gives them value, like recommendations and stuff like that on LinkedIn gives them value. And so if we look for opportunities like that, we can push those relationships further. And then, after you do it for 6 months or a year and you've built all those relationships up, then maybe you start reaching out to people in the community that are just fun and have big social presence. And then maybe you start to worry about the audience and you start to think about how much engagement you're getting. But don't do that until you've got 50 people that love you and, you're hardcore, like what I would call your home base.
This is great because, and you're living proof that you live this. You're not just talking about it, because when you interviewed me on Real Estate Uncensored, immediately after the interview, we ended the interview and then you said, how can I help you? You put me in touch with 3 or 4 other people that also put me on their podcast immediately. We got to talking. I mean, you added value like this, right? It was second nature for you to add value.
And by that time it was, yeah.
So what's interesting though, I think for agents is that you're laying out the next step. The next step is when you're in conversation with anyone, you're looking at what's the next thing I can do to add value to this relationship, right?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
That's what
so like every week, and I need to be, we all have areas where we fall off, but I need to be more disciplined about this sometimes too. But so every week I sit down with one of my marketing gals, right? And we look at a Trello board. So Trello is the project management tool we use that runs my entire agency. So we look at that, and I have a Trello board of relationships. And by the way, Jim, you're on it. So I would pull up your card, and I would go, hey, how long has it been since I introduced Jim to somebody? Or like I would just look at that board, and I would go, okay, well, I was just on this, and ooh, Jim would be good for that. All right, I'm going to connect Jim with this, and I'm going to connect Jamie with this person. And I just look at that board, and I'm just looking for connections.
Yeah.
But it's a discipline you have to get into to do it every week. But like you said, with the power centers, like once you get into the power centers, one of the best way you can add value, and it's one of the easiest ways to solve the problem of how do I keep in touch with these people without feeling like I'm taking. Keep in touch with them with the intention of introducing them to other people that be valuable. That's the best thing you can do for a really successful, busy person is to introduce them to somebody else that can bring value to their life or their business. And the more you get connected with people and the more you make an effort to introduce people to each other, you don't even have to do anything. Like that has no reflection on your expertise. They don't know how good you are as an agent. They don't know anything. All they know is, holy cow, Matt's introduced me to 3 high-level people, and they all have good things to say about Matt.
Yeah.
It's like, well, the assumption is that I'm good at what I do. Now, nobody necessarily really knows. Now, I'm good at what I do, you know what I'm saying? But nobody really knows. Yeah, you got to have the base of actually being good. But, you know, like you can get away with it because they don't know. They just know that you're making an effort to bring value.
That's interesting because I think people struggle with that conversation. Like agents are like, well, what's the value point going to be? What is the value? But the value, what you're saying, which is incredibly valuable, is the introductions are really what we should think about. And that should be in our mindset of who we can introduce people to as one of the best values you can ever offer anyone is introduction to someone else, which is, I don't think that's on the top of most people's radar at all. I think it's kind of out there.
No, and it wouldn't have been on mine either. I wish I knew this stuff 10, 15 years ago. Yeah. I found out about it by hanging around the people that were doing it and just watching what worked.
Yeah.
And partly because I was running in a really small space. So I think agents think that we can hide a little bit. You know, we can give poor service, we can have poor communication. We can get away with a lot because, hey, there's another lead coming down the pipeline, and they don't know the last person I worked with. I didn't have that luxury. Like, I operate in such a small space that if I screw up on Greg Harrelson's podcast or Lars Hedenberg's podcast, guess what? Every other real estate coach is going to know it at some point.
Yep.
You know? I had something happen early on. And one of my mentors had to stand up for me because somebody mixed me up with somebody else and badmouthed me at a dinner, at a high-level dinner without me there in front of a bunch of other people that were really big in real estate. And my mentor had to go and just completely squashed it and stood up for me. But those kind of things can happen. Like, you know, like it raises the bar for your level of performance. Right. But if I didn't operate in that small of a space where every relationship was so important, I might have gotten into bad habits too. But if you think about it, in real estate, like the most important people are your top 150 people in your database. It's not the 5,000 that 3,000 of them are Boomtown leads from your team. It's the top 150 people that actually know your name and will take your phone call. Like that's where the strength of your business really is. So I got that mentality because I just didn't have any choice.
What's interesting about that too, with the top 150, and one question we try to ask our coaching students, have them ask is, do you know the aspirational goals of your top 50? Do you know the aspirational goals of your top 100? Like, what are these people trying to accomplish?
Yeah,
and
that's
when
good.
You know people's aspirational goals, then you can connect them to the right people to help them. So it's kind of aligned with what you're saying is, if I know that this person wants to become a surfer, and I know that one of the best surfers, you know, in my circle that I've ever met, I can connect these guys, right? And I should be thinking along those lines instead of always having it be about, you know, the next referral or the conversation about real estate. It's more about what do they want to accomplish and how can I help people accomplish it, which is kind of along the lines of what you're saying.
It is, and it takes. This is why going back to the idea of having a home base. Part of having that base of people that know, like, and trust you, and you're secure in the fact that they're going to send you referrals and things like that, I'm sure you've seen this to be true. Like when you're worried about the next commission, you can't think creatively, and it's really hard to make long-term good decisions.
Yeah.
You end up making short-term decisions, and that's, like you can fight against that all you want, but really the only solution to it is to get your business on solid enough ground to where you can start to make long-term decisions. And I think agents miss out on a lot of things they could be doing. They spend so much time running from shiny object to the next that they never get really anything solid and dependable. And so they always live in a state of this perpetual insecurity. And because of that, it's not that they really can't think. They can think creatively in the sense that if somebody pitches them another CRM, they're going to listen. That's not a good thing. Where you really want to open up your brain to is, hey, my business is on solid ground. Now let's start thinking about what I want my business to be like 2 years from now. How do I get more clients that I love, not more clients that I tolerate?
Yes.
You can't ask those types of questions and really get any good answers if you're worried about the next commission check. Your brain doesn't allow you to open up that way.
Yeah.
You just got to get there.
An interesting tactic, I think, along those lines, where agents sometimes struggle with that question, like, I don't really know who I want to be my ideal client, is to go back and look maybe at your last 20 clients that you had and say, which one did I enjoy working with the most? And what did they look like, right? What was their demographic pattern? What was their socioeconomic status? And that might help define that to some degree.
And agents get themselves hung up on that because they're like, well, I can't really market to that. I can't market to a certain specific type of married dual income. Like I'll run afoul of all kinds of regulations. Like, no, just stop.
Yeah.
People respond at such a subconscious level that the choice of picture on your website will attract the right or the wrong people. The choice of colors. Are they premium brand colors, or are they everyman brand colors? Look at the beer industry. Beer industry doesn't tell you who their ideal client is. They show you by how they market to you. Like I am a Scotch guy. Like I enjoy the marketing for Scotch because I'm a Scotch guy. I'm not interested in how Budweiser is marketed because I wouldn't order a Bud in a beer to save my life. But anyway, but they don't market. They don't say like, hey, Budweiser's the beer for the everyman that sweats at work and goes home and takes a shower with greasy fingers and then wants to grab a beer from the fridge. They show that to you in the way that they market, and you can do the same thing.
It's very interesting. I love that. I just heard a Samuel Adams commercial as I was driving back from work today, and it was exactly what you're saying. They know who their audience was, and it was targeted directly to the guy that's going to grab a Samuel Adams. And you got an image in your mind of who this guy was, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Me, but it could be, you definitely felt who it was. if you look at the imagery and the visuals of most marketing, I think you get a sense of what they're trying to push for. That's really interesting. I think a really a good way of looking at it. So when you're coaching people on, if somebody wants to start a podcast, like that's a part of their overall marketing, what would be like your first step suggestion for starting a podcast?
Well, the first thing I tell them, especially in the circles that I run in, is go get featured first.
Yeah.
Because that helps you figure out what's the message that really resonates with people and what's the thing that you can say that attracts the ideal clients to you. Because if you don't know that yet, you really don't have something that you can hang a show around. Yeah. And so I've made the mistake of working with some people where starting a podcast was kind of their first foray into things. They hadn't been featured enough. They didn't really know what resonated with the right people. And so, you're kind of flying blind going into starting a podcast, and you really don't know what attracts the right people to them. So I would say go do that first. Go figure that out first. And then for the average agent, I'm not convinced the general public wants podcasts from agents. Now, podcasts for agents from coaches are brilliant, and all the attention of agents is on podcasting, so I'm all in. But I'm not convinced that consumers want long interview podcasts from agents about the local space. I think they want short videos. So whether that's on YouTube about neighborhoods, they want interviews with people in video form. So Facebook and YouTube of local service professionals that are answering legit questions that they have. There's a lot of stuff that consumers do want from agents. I don't know that it's necessarily a podcast. So I would focus, if I were an agent, on doing Facebook Lives and YouTube videos that focus on the community and present myself as an expert on the community in the spaces where my ideal clients are moving to and from.
Love it. Yeah, and some people refer to that as hyper-local videos, where you're going down in even neighborhoods or into cities. I just did a class on relocation because of the urban flight buyer. You know, we got all these people leaving metro markets and going to suburbs and rural properties. And if you do a search almost anywhere in the country, you go and YouTube is the second largest, most searched, portal behind Google, and they're owned by Google. But if you search Park City, Utah, which I just did, you see no videos come up about Park City, Utah, except
Seriously?
one. Yeah, try it. I mean, there's no hyper local video for Park City, Utah, except one that says 5 reasons why you should not live in Park City, Utah. So if you're an agent and living in Park City and you're listening to this, here's an opportunity to go out and create a hyper local video, exactly what Matt's saying, and dominate that space. If you did 4 or 5 back to back, you'd be the only one there.
Yes.
And that's a high level. You know, that's an expensive market, and it's a shocking.
That's crazy. I was going to say, I thought I knew somebody out there. I'm going to have to check on his videos and see if either I got the city wrong or he's been slacking.
Search.
Yeah.
But I think that's actually really, really smart what you're saying. I think sometimes people, the shiny object right now is podcasting, and I see a lot of agents trying it. Maybe you're right. Maybe that's not the right.
Well, I'll give you a little tiny bit of inside information.
Okay.
So in viral marketing, the agency I used to work for, all of their 500 plus clients have all of their videos, which come out 2 to 3 times a month, turned into podcasts. So on iTunes, there are literally 500 local, hyper-focused real estate podcasts that mostly the general public doesn't know exists.
Yeah. Okay.
Why? Because they'd rather consume that content via YouTube or going to the agent's website and watching it embedded on the YouTube channel. And so nobody is asking them, like the general public is not looking at those videos coming out by email that the agency produces and going, hey, can I get this content in podcast form? Because the answer is already yes, that already exists. Nobody is asking for it, right? So that tells me, and it's why Greg McDaniel has been trying to talk me into doing like long form content for the general public in real estate for 6 years, and I've always told him no, because I just, outside of HGTV and that sort of content, that seems to be what the general public wants from real estate. We want to talk about, you know, the closings and the inspections and all the fun, interesting stuff that makes us feel valuable as agents. I don't think the general public cares. I think that's why they hire us to begin with.
Yeah, I agree.
They don't want to know.
Yeah.
So tell them the stuff they do want to know.
Like on HGTV, you're getting the visuals, and you're not getting a visual.
You don't get the visual on the podcast. Exactly.
It's hard to describe it.
Yes, and you talking about the intricacies of the urban. Now maybe urban flight, like people want to know about stuff like that because it's very much in the news. But if you're talking about the intricacies of the inspection process, put it in a 3-minute YouTube video.
100%. I love it. So, Matt, let's talk about your book and how do people get it? I mean, where do people find that?
Well, you can definitely get it on Amazon, or you can also go to my website, getmicrofamous.com, and there's a way to get it for free, which you can get from there. So whether it's physical copy, digital copy, whatever you prefer. And so the genesis of the book is just want to lay out the roadmap, essentially. So we've talked a lot of the different elements, but I think where people really struggle is they, especially in real estate, are constantly bombarded by companies selling them one thing that if they just get one deal, it'll pay for itself. That's like a mantra. You might as well get it. If you're a CRM salesman, it might as well just be tattooed on your forearm. And that is a terrible way to make business decisions, by the way. Yes. Anyway, I know you as a coach must just drive you up a wall. Anyway, point being, I wanted to give people a framework and a roadmap to understand, hey, this is where the tactics fit into the bigger picture. And if you just do a bunch of tactical things, it won't work in the absence of the bigger picture. Because the bigger picture is those decisions we talked about. Who are the right people? How do you become famously influential to them? What do you stand for? What are you known for? Right? If you don't get any of those things right and you just do all this tactical stuff, what you'll end up with, best case scenario, is you've got a lead generation system where you've got to make 100 calls to get 2 deals. Like that's not a very fun life to live. I would rather have my marketing attract the right people so that when people call me up, odds are they're at least someone that I enjoy talking to, even if the timing and some of the other factors aren't right. I would still, I attract the right people into my world. You know, I mean, Jim, you're a great example. We have an awesome time. I didn't specifically pursue you. We came in because we know, was it James that introduced
James
us?
Colburn.
James Colburn. And because James is my kind of guy.
Yeah,
like he was down here a month ago and we hung out in San Diego and had a great time. Like I love him. But because I build those relationships, I attract more of those types of awesome people into my life, sometimes without even trying. And then I have that system you mentioned that just builds the relationship. And then it just kind of we get pulled into each other's orbits, and the next thing you know, we've known each other for 5 years, and you've sent me 3 clients. Yeah. Like, that's just the way that it goes. If you've got a lot of those other things right, and I hope that the effect that I hope with MicroFamous is to push back against the Gary V. Hustle is everything. Spend 10 hours a day on Instagram. Yeah. Shoot 15 selfies. Like, stop doing that and start figuring out who the right people are so that you can just speak to them and ignore everyone else.
I love that. I love the pushback against the influencer, because that is everywhere on Instagram. You know, you're seeing people who have professional photo shoots every week in their office, and they think that that's somehow going to lead to business. But you're right. It's not adding any value whatsoever to the relationship. You know, just having a follower count doesn't do anything. No. So I love your concepts. I think they're spot on, exactly right. Nice. So how else can people, follow you, watch you, and just experience?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, if you're in real estate, you got to go check out Real Estate Uncensored. That's the granddaddy. That's my first podcast. We're at 1.5 million downloads, and just made. Somebody put out a list of like the top 20 real estate podcasts, and we were number 3. I think their own podcast may have been number 1. Who knows? I don't know who wrote the article, but it was nice to be mentioned. So go check that out. And then if you're really interested in diving into the strategy side of becoming MicroFamous, and especially if you're not a big reader, which I get is a lot of people out there, just go to microfamouspodcast.com. That's where I do like weekly 15-minute episodes, small chunks. I just dive into one key idea, and that way it's a way to kind of stay on top of those concepts without having to dive into the book.
I love it. Thank you so much for being on the program today, my friend. You've dropped a lot of great information. I learned a lot. I took a bunch of notes. So I'm going to be using a lot of this.
Glad it was valuable.
You got me rethinking my whole business strategy right now. I'm like, I got to change everything I'm doing right now. I'm totally doing everything wrong.
Oh, man, that's awesome. Well, don't throw your whole world into disarray, but I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Matt.